Welcome to Development Talks at South News. I'm Bill Miller. What role does Italy play as a very active member of the United Nations? What are some of the major issues Italy is dealing with at home, such as migration from Northern Africa? My guest today is an expert on all of these topics. My guest today is His Excellency, Ambassador Sebastiano Cardi, who is the permanent representative from Italy to the United Nations. Ambassador Cardi currently serves as the chair of the United Nations Second Committee. Ambassador Cardi, Your Excellency, welcome to South News.
Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate you being with me today. Italy is a very active player at the United Nations. You have a multitude of press releases every week that come out on different topics, very important issues. Before we get to that, let's talk about an issue that we're seeing a lot about. It seems like every day we pick up the paper and we see where more and more migrants have come from Northern Africa, and they usually come through Italy because you're a Mediterranean country, you're strategically situated. How big of a burden is this right now with this influx of literally thousands of migrants into Italy?
It is a big burden that Italy is trying to address with all the means at its disposal. Of course, the political one, first of all, because, the influx of migrants is the product of instability, of conflicts, of violence, of persecutions. So first of all, we are trying politically to help these countries, the countries of origin, where the instability lies, for example, in Libya in this moment, especially in Libya and Syria, to address the situation there, to help the political process, to establish new institutions that in turn can stabilize the country. But what we are doing especially is to try to address the really enormous humanitarian tragedy that is happening in the Mediterranean along our shores and in front of our country, rescuing people, putting military resources, civilian resources in place in the sea, to help these people avoid, being killed, being, the victims of tragedies at sea. So we have, in the last year, we have saved, I think, more than 1,000 lives with the operation called Mare Nostrum. The Italian Navy had ships deployed in the sea, and of course was rescuing these boat people. People fleeing from conflicts, as I said, and trying to have a better future on small boats, on small rafts, and most of the time these boats, of course, capsize or so there are incidents. So we try to rescue people, to save lives, and to address the humanitarian concerns. This is the first issue for us.
And these are certainly compelling forces that drive people to get into rickety boats and to put their lives at risk and to go out to sea. And when you look at them, you wonder how they survive. People are standing shoulder to shoulder, back to back, and how do they survive for days on these boats with, I'm assuming, very little food, very little water, what type of sanitation facilities they have. It really is a major challenge for you and for them, I guess.
It's a major challenge, of course, and this is why the first objective, as I said, is to help saving lives. And of course, we also have to address the traffickants, the criminal organizations that are taking advantage of these poor people fleeing conflicts from Africa and Middle East. And to address that, we have tried within the European Union to mobilize all the countries of the European Union to establish a new operation. So it's in addition to what Italy is doing, European Union members' ships are joining our Navy and our cargo ships to help, address this issue. But of course, it's important, and we are seeking the help of the UN, the UN Security Council, to have a mandate that could give a mandate to the European Union to dismantle possibly the smugglers and the traffickants organization in the coast of the Mediterranean, especially in Libya in this moment, because it is where the instability lies. To address that and to try to force the Libyan authority, to help the Libyan authorities to help us in dismantling these traffickers. This is our primary objective, primary priority, and we are doing that with the help of all the countries of the United Nations, and we are talking to everybody to explain that it would be a very limited operation, a naval operation mainly, first of all to rescue lives, to help people, to stop the humanitarian tragedy. The Mediterranean cannot become a graveyard. and also, if possible, to avoid these people to taking advantage. It's a big business now, of course, and criminal organizations are very fast to enter in this business. And also there is a strong concern about possible financing through these activities of terrorist organizations.
Now, you mentioned the Mare Nostrum program, RC program, and I'm curious about this. This is basically the Italian Navy that's being mobilized to intercept and to assist these refugees who are in these very rickety boats. Is a large part of the Navy involved in this, or is it, maybe we can't say exactly how many ships are involved, but it's probably a substantial number of ships and personnel, I would imagine, is it not?
It is a substantial number of ships and personnel, helicopters, of course. And 2 weeks ago, the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon visited Italy, and he was brought by the Prime Minister Renzi and Minister Gentiloni, together with High Representative of the European Union, Federica Mogherini, on one of these boats, the ship San Giusto, to see how the operations are conducted. And it is very important that the United Nations understand exactly that the primary concern of these operations, both the Italian and European Union operation, is really to address what has become a huge humanitarian tragedy in our seas. It is an important burden, of course, for us, so we are calling the solidarity of other European Union countries, and we got that in Brussels. But we're also, as I said before, we need the involvement of all countries concerned, countries of origin, countries of transit, so we have to work with the African Union, with the African countries, because this is mostly where the refugees are coming from. And we need to address, of course, the root causes of this instability, poverty, hunger, and conflicts.
Exactly. I think those last three you hit were perhaps the best long-term solutions to dealing with this particular problem, to take away the incentives to leave their countries and to move to coming to Italy. This, again, is there something else? I know the United Nations is involved, the UN system, the European Union, as you mentioned, the European countries, probably all of them are affected. Italy, perhaps more than any, because you're the gateway into Europe. But is there any more that the UN could do? I know the UN High Commission for Human Refugees, Human Rights, probably UN High Commission for Human Rights are involved with. Is there anything else perhaps that could be done that's not being done today?
Well, as I said, first of all, we are seeking a mandate from the UN Security Council to address this very grave situation we have now. That's for the short term, Of course, we have to address second issue, the root causes. This is what we do every day, post-2015, the new agenda for development. It is also, you mentioned human rights. It's a big concern for human rights. These people are, subject to all kind of violations, women, children, people thrown overboard from these small rafts because they are overcrowded, so they just leave them at sea. So there is a huge humanitarian and human rights concern. But also we need the UN to tackle this situation together with the member states. And the UN, through the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, for example, could do a lot. Ideally, we think at one point it would be important, it would be a huge operation, but to establish, UNHCR operations offices in transit countries and countries of origin to screen these people, because as we have been saying in Italy and in Brussels, as Italy, we are not going to stop the flow of refugees. It's not something that you can stop in the short term. You have to manage in a civilized manner these people. We have to grant them, when we can, the refugee status, but we also especially we have to make sure that they are not dying at sea.
Exactly. Well, I mentioned in the opening that Italy is a very active player at the United Nations. There are 193 member states of the UN, and Italy is certainly at the forefront on a large number of these issues. One is in the area of peacekeeping. We talk about peace and security. How does Italy view the 16 UN peacekeeping missions, and what role has Italy played in peacekeeping today and perhaps in the past or even in the future?
Well, Italy has been a traditional donor, traditional contributor to the UN peacekeeping from the start, actually. We are now the 7th largest contributor to the peacekeeping budget, 7th largest contributor to the UN budget also. We are the first Western countries of troops contributing. We have around 1,300 troops deployed as blue helmets, mainly in Lebanon, where we have also the force commander. We think the peacekeeping is is one of the core business of the UN, and we want to continue to give a strong contribution to that. It's important also to revise the peacekeeping operation, the concept, and we want to see more robust operations. Blue helmets have to be well equipped, they have to have intelligence capabilities, so this is something that Italy would like to contribute to, because we have a history and we have a tradition and we have resources that we can put at the disposal of the UN.
Very good. The peace and security, that's really one of the three main goals of the United Nations when the UN was formed, to eliminate the scourge of war. What do you see as perhaps the top two problems confronting peace and security in the world? We hear a lot about terrorism, we see immigration, we see a lot of other things. What do you see as maybe the top one or two issues that the nations of the world will have to grapple with to develop more peace and security?
I think right now probably is the the terrorist organization partnering with criminal organization on a very large scale, on a global scale, to destabilize countries, to destabilize entire areas such as the Sahelian area in Africa or the Horn of Africa. Also in Libya we can see that. So I think this is the biggest threat we are facing. It is crucial that all UN members join forces together, not only by providing troops, but there is a lot of work to do in intelligence sharing, better equipment, as I said, and gathering of information, exchange of information, so as to have a broad range of countries able to address what we see that now as the principal threat, which is terrorism. And by the way, there is also a very important aspect to that, is the cultural destruction by terrorist organizations that is happening right now in many places, in Africa, in Middle East, elsewhere, in Libya, we fear. And Italy has been among the promoters, one of the most active countries, and we have some ideas. We have to preserve the memory and the identity of the local communities, and we want to work with the UN members on that too.
Exactly. It seems that every country in the world is being confronted with climate change. There's no doubt about it. The scientific evidence is overwhelming as I see it or read it. And of course, the United Nations has been in the forefront on that with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the fifth report that just came out not long ago. How is Italy being affected by climate change, and what role is Italy playing in helping to deal with this issue that affects all 7.2 billion people on planet Earth?
Yes, Italy, by the way, it's important to say, is in Europe, for example, is one of the countries that has the most biodiversity, because we start in the north of Italy with the Alps, it's a great mountain environment. And then going to the south, you have the plains, agricultural plains, and then you go to the farther south of Italy, you have, more or less desert situation in some areas. So we have a broad range of biodiversity in Italy. So we are very well aware of the fact that climate change is impacting a lot on our on our economy, on our agriculture, on the stability of our societies. We have had numerous episodes of very strong weather patterns that we didn't see in the last 30 years. So it is a concern for us. We have also some cities that run the risk of being underwater, like Venice, which is patrimony of the humanity. So Italy is really at the forefront, together with some European countries, the United States, of course, China and others, to try to tackle this issue. I think there is a need for mobilizing a huge amount of resources, because of course, we are talking about a lot of money that has to be invested to address this, industrial situation in which Italy is doing its part, turning to renewable energies. For example, the sun in Italy is very important, and we are doing a lot of that. And also we want to showcase that. In Italy we have now the Expo Milano running, which is the Expo international exhibition devoted to food and to energy. And we want to show the world what Italy is capable of doing in the renewable energy sector.
Exactly. And of course, you mentioned food. Food security is so important to every country in the world. And when we see that desertification is taking place, the climate is changing, people move, people have to. In fact, one of the main reasons the civil war started in Syria was because of a climate change connected type of activity and also diverting water into another area. But this is so very, very important. The United Nations, again, has been in the forefront on the climate change issue. Ban Ki-moon made that his #1 priority when he came in almost 9 years ago. So it's been a high priority for the UN for many years. There's a major conference coming up in Paris at the end of the year. How important is it for the countries of the world to come together, to bring all the key players, the NGOs, the private sector, and to really maybe develop that grand bargain we've been talking about for so many years?
It is crucial, I think. The Secretary General rightly made this one of the crucial points of his agenda, and one of his legacies probably will be the possibility to arrive at an agreement at COP21 in Paris in December. And I think the summit he hosted in September in New York was one of the major developments we saw in this particular field, because there was a lot of attendance, a lot of high-level political attendance, and it was really important that all the leaders took commitments, concrete commitments to keep the rise of temperatures within the 2 degrees Celsius limit, of course, which is the basic goal we are looking for. It's also, as you said, a question of putting together governments, international organizations such as the UN, and private firms, private industries, because this is where the problem lies most of the time. And one also aspect crucial in the next few years will be the cities around the world, because I think in 2050 cities will be the 90% biggest polluters. Because of course the population is crowding now the city more than any time before in history, and at one point we're going to have the cities as the new centers of probably clean energy development. So it is very important, and I think the Secretary General rightly focused on the role of cities, the biggest cities, in this respect, that even in Italy, Milano, Rome, Florence, they are all trying to join this drive for sustainable cities, which is, I think, one of the key aspects that we're going to have to work on in the future.
Exactly. And a lot of the urbanologists, the people who look at the cities, say that the cities will, as you mentioned, they will be the biggest contributor to climate change with the carbon emissions and that type of thing. But we can architecturally design buildings that are sustainably sound and that really are environmentally green to a large degree. So there's some hope in that area. But we do, as you mentioned, we're going to have to move quickly on this. We don't have much time, to put it mildly. We're talking about green energy too, and you mentioned in Italy that there's a move to move off of fossil fuels to some degree. We're having that debate in the United States, and probably every country is, because it appears that, according to the scientific evidence, that fossil fuels, coal, the oil, gas, those are the main contributors, leaving the biggest carbon footprint. What is Italy moving into wind, thermal, to looking at windmills, solar plates, things like that?
Well, geothermal energy in Italy has been strong for many, many years, because we have important geothermal sources of energy that have been already, I think, I don't want to be precise because I don't know figures exactly, but I think 10 or 15% of our energy comes from geothermal already. Then, of course, we have a lot of hydroelectric water. Of course, the waterfalls are important in Italy, but most of it is still fossil. So we are trying to make a strong push to renewable, especially on solar energy. Wind energy also is important, but there are some concerns, of these trees with the, how do you call them, this technical...
the blades?
It's the blades, exactly,
right.
which are very noisy, apparently. So I think solar energy could be really one, in Italy at least, one of the biggest instruments of changing the pattern from fossil fuel to renewable energies. And this we are doing with the help of private sector, encouraging investment in this sector, giving contributions, public contribution to firms that want to make the step towards renewable energies. So for us, this is one of the biggest challenges for the future.
Mm-hmm. Now this year you're chairing one of the 6 committees, major committees at the United Nations. The second committee, we've talked about a lot of issues today. Are there 2 or 3 others that you're dealing with? I know that committee has a broad agenda, but are there 2 or 3 other issues that you're dealing with that you'd like to share today?
Well, the 2 big issues that we dealt with on the second committee is, of course, post-2015, which is now, of course, dealt by two very capable co-facilitators. And the second, of course, is financing for development, which is at the basis of the post-2015 agenda, because you can have an agenda, you can have goals, you can select, what kind of policies you have to put in place in the next 15 years. But if you don't have the means of implementation, the resources, well, everything is going to be on paper, just on paper. So financing for development, the financing, the public aid of governments is important, but we are trying to concentrate also a little bit on innovative ways of financing development. And we are very interested in the role of private sector, foundation, what is called the philanthropic institutions. There is a large amount of untapped resources there that are sitting in the banks. They are idle. And we have promoted a couple of events at the UN, at the United Nations, to just reflect on this issue and to see how this new form of financing, social financing we call it, can be used in addition to public spending, of course, to increase the resources at the service of third world development.
Exactly. And you mentioned financing for development, FFD. There's a conference, major conference, I believe, next month in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And of course, they'll be dealing with these issues and coming up with specific recommendations. Is that correct?
It is correct, and I think the Secretary General rightly has asked all the world leaders to attend, and I'm very happy to report that Italy will be present. The Prime Minister of Italy, Matteo Renzi, has decided to attend this conference together with his African, Asian, and Latin America counterparts and European counterparts. As I said, it will be a crucial moment of the post-2015. We need a success in Addis Ababa. Success in terms of commitments, resource commitments. And I think it's important that all the traditional donor countries come with fresh ideas, fresh resources if possible, to commit for the next 15 years what is needed not to bring only countries out of underdevelopment, but especially, for example, in Africa, to untap the economic potential that is there and it's already ready to be tapped. So it's important not to talk only about the traditional development to the cooperation to development, but also now more and more in terms of economic growth.
Exactly, very true. And when I think back to 2000, we were talking about the Millennium Development Goals and now the Sustainable Development Goals. It'll be kicking in 2016. How important was this? We look back, flashback, you weren't here, or you may have been here in another capacity, I'm not sure, but as you think back to 2000 when Secretary General Kofi Annan and the member states of the United Nations, Italy played a key role in that, developed the 8 Millennium Development Goals to reduce abject poverty by 50%, to promote universal primary school education, to empower women. How important was that at that whole concept to try to bring the world together, the NGOs, the private sector, to focus on these goals to achieve them?
It was very, very important. I think the MDGs, as the Millennium Development Goals, as they were called, were very important. Maybe not all of them have been reached completely, but certainly, even if it's 80% of the objectives that were set in 2000, a lot have been done, and an enormous amount of resources has been spent, and we see that especially in Africa, as I said before, because Africa is clearly showing signs of, going to a next phase, a new phase of economic, industrial development, which is what is needed. Not only, giving humanitarian or emergency aid for hunger or anything like that. You have to help them pass through the pre-industrialization phase. This is really development. And the private sector, you mentioned the partnerships. This is, I think, the biggest idea the UN has promoted in the last 10 years. And this is the future. I mean, private sector has to step in.
Exactly. They have the largest wallet, without a doubt. They have more money, and they have the resources to do it, whereas the governments are limited to some degree because they just aren't that large. As you look into the future with sustainable development goals, what do you see as some of the challenges to implementing them and to bring the parties together to get everybody working on them and trying to achieve them over the next 15 years?
Well, as I said, probably the big issue will be decreasing public spending, because we are facing, let's face it, we are facing in Europe and elsewhere some budget constraints. So the challenge, a big challenge, will be first to mobilize private resources. ODA will remain the core funding for development, of course, but this will be crucial. Private enterprises should more and more understand that it is in their interest to maybe forego a little bit of the profits that it can in these countries, and to help them create a new industrial environment, which will, of course, in turn be beneficial for all the global economic outlook. And the second, of course, will be the capacity of the UN, I think, to keep the focus on this economic growth of developing countries while we are confronted with new threats. As I said before, terrorism, in Africa and elsewhere is a major concern because it could very well derail our agenda for development. And that's something that we have to be very careful about.
Exactly. And Ambassador Cardi, as you mentioned, these are important issues, and we need to learn so much more about these issues because they do affect us. If certainly not today, they will tomorrow. But we have to stay abreast of this and learn more about them. And you have brought an immense amount of information today, but Your Excellency, Ambassador Sebastiano Cardi, permanent representative from Italy to the United Nations, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on South-South News and Development Talks.